Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, your in-depth look at how news here in Taiwan impacts the world. I'm Rick Lowett. Taiwan is one of the world's largest economies, mainly driven by its expertise in high technologies such as semiconductors. But its wages lag way behind other advanced economies. Taiwan's minimum wage is just over $800 a month. With house prices and the cost of living soaring here, it's become a hot button issue in the upcoming presidential election. To discuss this, we're joined by labour rights researcher and activist Roy Ngerng. Roy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
Before we zoom in, let's start by setting the scene a little here. Elections are coming up in Taiwan. Could you tell us just how big an issue is minimum wage?
I think minimum wage as an issue is increasingly important in this year's presidential elections. Past elections in Taiwan have been fought on the threat of China and its national security risk to Taiwan. But in this election, the China platforms have been converging across the parties, and there is an increasing need for them to try to differentiate themselves in terms of the policies they can do for Taiwan's society and livelihoods. When it comes to the minimum wage, housing prices and the cost of living is one aspect that influences the perception of how wages are low in Taiwan. And wages are low in Taiwan across the board because the minimum wage is low as well. And if the minimum wage is low, it is not able to pull up wages at the other levels. And thus, the low minimum wage is a key issue that influences the election this time around.
And so its opposition candidate for the Kuomintang, the KMT, his name is Hou Yu-ih, who's got the strongest proposal for raising the minimum wage in Taiwan. He's proposing raising the minimum wage by 20% to 33,000 new Taiwan dollars, which is about $1,000 US. How significant would this raise be?
I think a minimum wage to $33,000 is significant in Taiwan's election because it sets quite a high target as compared to the current minimum wage. It is actually about 20% above the current minimum wage. When you compare with Taiwan's current cost of living, the minimum income that is needed for a basic standard of living could be minimally $35,000 to $40,000. And that's considered a very basic standard of living. If we are looking in terms of the living wage, which other countries take into account, say annual vacation, enough time off for entertainment and recreation, it would be even higher. So Taiwan's minimum wage would be minimally 35,000 Taiwanese dollars, and Hou Yu-ih's proposal to raise it to 33,000 would be close to the minimum income needed for a basic standard of living.
And how would this policy change affect Taiwan's society? Who would it help?
Taiwan's economy is stagnant, especially the domestic economy, in part because minimum wages are too low. So if wages are able to increase faster, it would allow the minimum wage to act as an economic multiplier to enable household consumption, profits, and economy to multiply. At the same time, higher minimum wage has been shown to increase productivity, it has been shown to increase innovation and motivation among workers. These will act as another form of multiply effect in that it would allow businesses to innovate and invent higher value products that would allow them to churn out higher profits and thereby also impact on Taiwan's economy and allow it to grow faster.
And you've been describing Hou Yu-ih, the opposition candidate, as the only candidate so far in the presidential election to reveal a policy for the low wages here. Could you tell us a little bit about the frontrunner, Lai Ching-te? He's the current vice president and he's also the candidate for the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or the DPP. What has he said about Taiwan's low wages?
Lai Ching-te's response was that a target is not that important, but he would look into ensuring that the minimum wage law would be passed. However, Lai Ching-te was the premier and also the vice president under President Tsai Ing-wen, and President Tsai Ing-wen has actually promised 7 years ago that if elected, she would implement the minimum wage law. So to say that Lai Ching-te would want to complete introducing the minimum wage law, it would actually indicate that President Tsai has not met her promise of passing the minimum wage law, and that we are now relying on Lai Ching-te to do it if he gets elected. But a promise has already been broken. So it might create doubt as to whether Lai Ching-te would be able to still do so. I think a more favorable position that should happen is that the minimum wage law should be passed before the presidential election next year, and that if Lai Ching-te gets elected as president, he should actually look to implement a minimum wage target and raise Taiwan's minimum wage at a much faster level.
Let's start zooming out a little bit here. So this isn't the first time that minimum wage has been an election issue here in Taiwan. President Tsai Ing-wen, who won the previous two elections, she also platformed minimum wage increases. How successful do you think she's been?
President Tsai said that she would increase the minimum wage to $30,000 when she was elected. But up till now, the minimum wage in the last year of her presidency has only increased to $27,470. This is far from the figure that President Tsai promised. During her first term, one of the vice premiers said that a way to achieve the target could be to implement a 4 to 6 year increase that could ensure that the minimum wage is increased to $30,000. But President Tsai at that time rejected it because she said that businesses, if the economy grows faster, they are likely to also increase wages faster. But what we're seeing is that this did not happen, and Taiwan's minimum wage has continued to remain stagnant as compared to the cost of living. So President Tsai has actually not achieved her promise.
And could you tell us a little bit about why Taiwan's wages are so low? Where is pushback coming from when it comes to raising the minimum wage? Why does Taiwan have such low wages?
Taiwan's minimum wage started stagnating from the 1997 crisis. I think at that time, in response to the crisis, Taiwan decided to adopt a low-cost approach to running the economy, and therefore wages and costs have been kept low since then. However, whenever the minimum wage discussion is brought up, some of the misconceptions that business groups have propagated is that the minimum wage will increase unemployment, the minimum wage will increase prices, that the minimum wage will not benefit all workers, and that it will only benefit migrant workers. And therefore, Taiwanese should not support the minimum wage increase. But if you look at the historical data in Taiwan, when minimum wage rises, unemployment actually decreases because higher wages attract people back into the low wage industries. It also means they would have more income in their hands to spend, and therefore it encourages higher employment. At the same time, when household consumption increases, this also allows businesses to expand and therefore also employ more workers. Higher minimum wage therefore supports minimum wage increases. Another misconception that business groups try to propagate is that minimum wage increases will drive consumer price increases. But if you look at South Korea and New Zealand, their minimum wage is actually increasing much faster than food prices. So to say that the minimum wage increase is contributing to food prices might not be that accurate, because what is actually happening is that businesses are using it as an excuse to increase prices. Just comparing with other advanced countries like Korea and New Zealand, there is no need for food prices to increase at such a fast rate. Also, if you look at the minimum wage growth, it does impact workers across all levels. If you compare with every other advanced country, when the minimum wage grows by a much faster rate, wages at other wage levels also grow at a faster rate. Eventually, we need to recognize that these businesses are working in their own interest. They might have business interests in other low-cost developing countries, and they're trying to pull down Taiwan's minimum wage so that they can continue using a low cost to drive their businesses elsewhere as well. But this has a negative impact on Taiwan's economy.
Some might say that Taiwan's cost of living is lower compared to other advanced nations, and that low wages and low minimum wage is not such a big issue in Taiwan. What do you say to that?
Actually, before I came to Taiwan, I did some research, and I was thinking to myself, Taiwan's consumer prices are quite low, so the low wages are acceptable. About living in Taiwan and looking at the prices, there are some aspects of Taiwan's prices that are actually quite high. Food prices, grocery prices in Taiwan are actually on par with Singapore and actually on par with many other wealthier advanced countries. Taiwan's housing prices are actually very high. If you look at Taipei, Taipei's housing prices are comparable with some of the most expensive advanced countries in the world. Also, if you compare with other basic needs, such as university fees, um, on a purchasing power parity basis, that's actually not affordable. Compared to Taiwan's low wages, there is actually a lot of room for other prices to be lower, if not for Taiwan's wages to increase to match its cost of living. There are other aspects, of course, that are relatively cheap in Taiwan, say the national health insurance, that allows healthcare costs to be relatively cheap. But then if you need long-term healthcare needs, say if you need to be hospitalized for a month or so, it is still expensive if you compare with other Western advanced countries where healthcare can be free. So we need to take a more nuanced approach when looking at Taiwan's cost of living. There is a general perception that the cost of living is low, but there are some aspects that are actually high, and these are actually important aspects and important basic needs: housing, food, healthcare for a long term. That the current minimum wage and current wages in Taiwan do not adequately cover as well. One of the concepts that are being promoted in other advanced countries at this point is the living wage concept. Taiwan has achieved advanced country status, and we should not be expecting Taiwan's workers or Taiwan's citizens to be living based on very basic bare necessities. We should be ensuring that due to Taiwan's wealth, that it should be able to ensure workers can take adequate time off, that they can go on short vacation once a year to ensure that they are able to distress, that they are able to contribute effectively at work.
Just to sum up, I'd like to ask you to paint a picture of how Taiwan's low wages are affecting society.
We can see that the higher the inequality, the higher the mental conditions, say schizophrenia, and that we also see more traffic deaths. There are also other social impacts, say people lack trust towards democracy, and they lack trust towards one another. But as to whether there is that sense of belief or support for democracy in Taiwan in terms of people having that voice to speak up, having that empowerment to believe that they can participate in civil society, this is actually quite weak in Taiwan. One of the reasons, of course, is due to the labor participation in unions, which is very low due to the difficulty of unionization. The other reason is because when workers are paid such low wages, and they work such long hours and have such low numbers of holidays and leave, one of the lowest among the advanced countries in Taiwan. People are less patient on the road because they tend to want to rush to work. They tend to want to, they do not have enough time to take breaks. Therefore, they are less concerned about the other people in society. There is less trust and there's less support in democracy.
Roy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. For more stories from TaiwanPlus, please follow our Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
We bring you stories from Taiwan.
Every day of the week.
Our reporters travel the nation.
Exploring the issues that matter to you.
News from here in Taiwan and around the world.
What's up, Taiwan? Weekdays on TaiwanPlus.